I've heard a lot of people say that the Netflix documentary left out some details that they think are important, so let's just talk about the entire thing. We're talking about Mackenzie Shirilla. I have covered this case before, but it's been a while. Around 5:40 a.m. on July 31st, 2022, a horrible car crash took place in Strongsville, Ohio. It was in the early hours of a Sunday morning, meaning that not a lot of people were out and about and no one was there to call emergency services right away when the crash took place. It wouldn't be until after the car had run through the lawn, hit a sign, crashed into a brick building, and practically split in two that a witness would see the aftermath 45 minutes later and call it in. Inside the car were three people. 19-year-old Davion Flanagan was in the back seat, 20-year-old Dominic Russo was in the passenger seat, and 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla was the driver. Every single one of them was trapped inside, all of them unconscious. Davion, who was sitting in the back, had been thrown from the force of the crash, and he was found on Dominic's lap. Despite their best efforts, neither of them were able to be saved, and they were both pronounced deceased at the scene. It's believed that they passed away on impact. Mackenzie Shirilla had to be cut out of the car. She was found trapped underneath the dashboard. She had critical injuries, including a broken leg and broken ribs, and was light flighted to the hospital immediately, where she would go on to receive extensive care. As horrible as the car crash was, she did survive, and she would eventually recover from her injuries. At the scene, on an officer's body cam, you can hear him say, "Rest in peace, buddy," and then he says, quote, "This is just going to be a nightmare of a day for this whole department," end quote. The night prior, that friend group had all been together, and the plan of them was to have a sleepover. Yet for reasons we may never know, Mackenzie and Dom, after having been asleep, woke back up around 5 in the morning and decided to drive home. Those two were a couple. They had been dating for a few years, and Davion was a close friend of theirs. Davion had spoken to another friend who offered to drive him home, but he decided to get inside of that car because he just wanted to go home to go get some sleep. Obviously, he never made it back home. The reactions of the parents when they were informed were devastating. Davion was the oldest brother to his two little sisters. All three of them had been adopted by their parents. They called Davion's dad at work to let him know, and very quickly that entire family's world was turned upside down. Don's sister and Don's dad were completely in shock, and one of their immediate thoughts was concern for Mackenzie and hoping that she would make it. Mackenzie's parents drove and got to the hospital as soon as they could, and given that she was the only survivor, authorities wanted to speak to her when she was stable enough to see if they could get a statement from her. But when they got to the hospital, they were a little bit taken aback about how hesitant the Shirilla family was to speak to them. And there's something called pig Latin, okay? The definition is, quote, "Pig Latin is a playful language game used to conceal words or talk secretly," end quote. So it's like a made-up language where you move the first consonant of a word to the end and add AY to the end of it. So for example, pig becomes igpay and Latin becomes and lay. I guess it's a common thing for adults to use around their kids so that the kids do not understand what they're saying. Well, at the hospital, when they're informed that this is now going to be an investigation they have to look into, Mackenzie Shirilla is talking to her mom in this language or a very similar one. And in whatever language, you can hear her tell her mom, quote, "Can we tell the police I had a seizure? Can we tell the police?" something like that. Then she asks the officers if they could just take away her license for 10 years or something like that. So she is showing concern, but only for herself, right? So it kind of comes off as odd given that one of the victims was her close friend and the other one was allegedly the love of her life. The news of the crash spread quickly throughout Strongsville, and it seemed like people either thought one of two things: that this was a tragic, terrible accident, or that this was planned and done on purpose with the intent to murder. So like I said, Mackenzie Shirilla and Dominic Russo were a couple that was known to be constantly on and off. If you asked Mackenzie's parents what their relationship was like, they would tell you that they were in love, that they were soulmates, and that they probably would have gotten married. However, if you asked Dom's mom, who did know Mackenzie very well because they had spent a lot of time together, she would tell you that their relationship was toxic and unhealthy. And some, not all, but definitely some friends would agree with that as well. It was a common thing for Mackenzie and Dom to be constantly arguing. And Mackenzie is the type of girl that thinks it's my way or the highway. She has said that in her own words before. She was also extremely possessive over Dom, and more oftentimes than not, very controlling and very jealous. She was the type of girlfriend that would be like, "Oh, you want to break up with me? Well, that's too bad because I call the shots and I say that we are going to be together forever or else." Relationship aside, classmates have described her to be selfish and to carry around an ego that showed that she didn't really seem to care about anyone else but herself. The descriptions that multiple people have given make her sound reckless, self-centered, and insensitive. And some classmates have even said that they were not surprised about the crash at all because it sounded like something that Mackenzie Shirilla would do out of anger. This is a quote from Dom's older sister, quote, "From what I heard from his buddies and people that were close in their age, not that they saw the crash coming, but it wasn't a surprise for a lot of people based off her behavior and how she was," end quote. Mackenzie was also known to use substances daily and drive her car while doing so, which is extremely reckless yet important because it shows that she is more than capable of driving her car in that state, even though you shouldn't, but given that she pretty much did it every single day. So there were three possibilities. One, that maybe the night of the crash she had consumed a stronger substance that was found in her car that made her lose control, and she did black out and she did crash on accident. Yet, when the test results came back, there was nothing significant found in her system. The second option, two, that it was an accident as a result of POTS. POTS is a blood pressure disorder that Mackenzie had that can cause sudden dizziness, lightheadedness, and blackouts. But the question there is, if POTS was a real big safety concern, why would Mackenzie be allowed to drive at all? It was her mom that was arguing the most about this being the case, really making her concern for POTS known. Yet Mackenzie Shirilla was 17 years old. She had had her license for a while, but she was not an adult. And when she got her license, her nor her parents ever mentioned POTS at the DMV. Her mom signed off on allowing her daughter to have a license to be able to drive wherever, drive on the highway, because there was no real concern about her experiencing dizziness. To then argue that this is what happens when two people are gone, it feels convenient. Leaving the third option to be that Mackenzie got in a fight with her boyfriend, threatened him, and crashed into that building on purpose to end it all, without considering the consequences, without considering the many people that she would hurt, and without even giving a second thought to a person that she described to be her friend sitting in the back seat, Davion Flanagan. So as investigators start learning more about this couple and about what the dynamic of the relationship was, mixed with evidence from the crime scene along with CCTV footage that would later be revealed in court, things started to look pretty bad for Mackenzie. And officers had reason to believe that she could have been responsible for causing this tragedy on purpose, that purpose being death. And it didn't help her case when a friend of Dominic Russo spoke to authorities and told them about something that had happened previously. That friend had been on the phone with Dom during a fight with Mackenzie when he heard her say, quote, "I will crash this car right now," end quote. This wasn't the night of. This was a previous night, a previous incident when she did not go through with it, but she did mention that she would and that she could. Dominic's mother, Christine, had also been contacted by her son weeks before the crash, specifically because he was scared, because they were arguing again and Mackenzie was driving erratically on the freeway with Dominic in the car. That time he called his mom asking for help, but Mackenzie would claim that it was actually Dominic who would grab the steering wheel and try to crash the car, not her. We also know that at a different time, Mackenzie had threatened to key Dominic's car and to break off a handle off of a door after he refused to let her come inside. Into his house, by the way. All of this was evidence that authorities were gathering to say that this was part of a pattern of escalating controlling behavior in the weeks leading up to July 31st of 2022, and they believed that it formed an argument that the crash was not as a result of an accident, but instead the culmination of that pattern. But what really confirmed the suspicions they already had were the results of the tests that they received in regards to the car itself and the CCTV footage they were able to get their hands on. Because the only other option left, apart from the ones that I already mentioned, would have been that the car itself malfunctioned. Yet, when the car was taken apart piece by experts, it was confirmed that every single thing in that car was working as it should have been, and this was not a result of any sort of mechanical error. There was nothing wrong with the car. But what the car data did show was that only seconds before the impact, Mackenzie inexplicably sped up and made a hard steering turn to the right directly into that brick building. She had been driving 25 miles an hour, and then in the span of 20 to 25 seconds, she sped up to 100 miles an hour. Data from the car confirmed that her right foot was pressed down on the accelerator to its full extent, pushing the car over 100 miles per hour, and that the brake pedal was never applied at any point before impact. Mackenzie's foot never touched the brake pedal. In those 20 to 25 seconds it took for her to speed up, her foot stayed solely on the accelerator the entire time. She had time to decide to slow down, but she did the opposite. And to go back to her diagnosis of POTS, if this had been accidental, if she blacked out and lost control of the car, authorities felt that that would have been shown in the way that she was driving. Yet on CCTV footage, before the car gets onto the road that it would speed down, Mackenzie is seen driving completely normal. Driving the speed limit, like I mentioned, 25 miles per hour, putting her blinker onto turning carefully and normally, clearly in control of the car. Then 58 to 59 seconds later, she speeds up and does not try to stop. Authorities also uncovered GPS data that showed that Mackenzie had driven that exact route of the crash days before the incident multiple times, the route which was one that she did not usually take, which prosecutors cited as premeditation. This was calculated. It was not a road that she had any reason to be on. The fact that she had driven it beforehand suggested to the prosecution that she had scouted the location in advance. They also believe that she planned it to do it 2 days before her 18th birthday so that she could not be tried as an adult. So, combined with the prior threats, the prior route, the sharp right turn of the steering wheel, and the full acceleration, prosecutors argued that this this was no medical episode. It was not an accident. It was not a moment of recklessness, and they were now confident that these were planned murders. On November 4th, Mackenzie Shirilla was arrested on multiple charges, including aggravated murder and aggravated vehicular homicide. And I saw someone say that during her arrest, specifically in the clips shown in that Netflix documentary, Mackenzie's only concern is not being able to wear her bracelets and keep them on while in custody, and her friend in the documentary argued that she wanted to keep those bracelets because Dom gave her the bracelets and they were the last things that she had from him. But in that same documentary, there are clips shown of how Dom showered Mackenzie with gifts. He would give her clothing and other items very often, which I doubt she threw away. So her friend's argument to me just kind of sounds a little bit irrelevant. And up until that point of her arrest, she had been in communication with Dom's family a lot. Dom's dad and sister had gone out of their way to spend time with Mackenzie, trying to help her as much as they could as she navigated the grief and the losing of her alleged love of her life and her friend. And in a text exchange between her and Dom's mother, Mackenzie wrote that she did not do anything on purpose. Christine says, quote, "What is the last thing that you remember?" To which she responds with, quote, "I remember turning on the street and then my vision fades to black. It really pains me not being able to remember anything. I promise I would tell you," unquote. Davion's family as well wanted to believe that this was an accident, yet everything changed after her arrest. She would remain in custody up until her trial, and despite her being 17 years old the day of and turning 18 2 days later, the court made the decision that she would be tried as an adult. Mackenzie's trial began August 7th of 2023. Now let's talk about evidence that was presented. But real quick, in the courtroom, she's shown wearing some sort of arm cast, right? There was no medical reason as to why she would have been needing to wear that. She was fine. She was just wearing it because she wanted to, I guess. I don't know. You decide. Anyway, first of all, CCTV footage of the crash was shown and it left the entire courtroom emotional. Davion's mom was sitting there and she watched it for the first time. She had to run to the bathroom because she got sick. She couldn't watch it. There were autopsy photos shown of both Davion and Dom, and during that, Dom's mom had to run out of the courtroom. Experts came up and testified about the gas pedal on the car, saying that it was pushed to its full acceleration capacity, pushed all the way down as far as it could go without any attempts to ever hit the brake. Also making sure to mention that 1 second before the crash, Mackenzie did a hard right turn on the wheel and into the brick building. There was evidence presented of Mackenzie's selfish and violent behavior, including a recording that Dom took of one of their arguments, where Mackenzie is heard threatening his property and calling him horrible names. And then the social media evidence. So following the accident, Mackenzie made it known on social media that she was grieving. She posted videos of her and Dominic saying things such as, quote, "I miss you, Nug. I still feel like you're just going to walk in the door any second. I miss your laugh, your perfect smile. God, you are the last person to deserve this. You had such a perfect life ahead of you. I wish I told you all this more. Please wait for me," end quote. And initially, a lot of people did feel bad for her until it almost seemed as if she was over it. She was grieving and heartbroken for about 5 minutes, and then she seemed to be completely fine. In the courtroom, there were screenshots shown of her activity on social media, screenshots of events that happened shortly after Mackenzie was released from the hospital after spending weeks there recovering, but obviously from before she was formally charged. Between that time period on social media, she and her mother were responding to a modeling agency in the comments of an Instagram post trying to work with them. Mackenzie was posting pictures of her friends out celebrating Halloween, dressing up as a corpse for Halloween, driving a car, and even attending a concert. And if you want my personal opinion, those are not signs of a person who is grieving and mourning, who just lost her boyfriend and good friend. Mackenzie's mother made a statement in the court. Don't even get me started. In my opinion, she made it so much worse for her daughter. Her mom went up there to talk about Mackenzie, trying to shut down any rumors or beliefs that she didn't care and that she wasn't mourning, which I get, right? I guess as a mother, you want to protect your daughter, but the lack of sympathy is actually insane, to the point that the judge interrupted her and said, quote, "I'm hearing an awful lot about your daughter. I'm not hearing very much about the 2 deceased people," end quote. The mom said, "I'm asking you for leniency because this was a tragic accident she does not remember. And Davion, he's a new friend and I'm so sorry." And the judge was like, "A new friend? What does that mean? His life is worthless?" It was bad. Mackenzie would have been better off if she just told her mom to sit down, honestly. At her sentencing, the judge said, quote, "There's only one person who's responsible for the pain of everyone in this room. That person is you, Mackenzie. Nobody else is responsible. This isn't the fault of Dominic's family or Davion's family or your family." Mackenzie was found guilty and she was sentenced to 2 sentences of 15 years to life to be served concurrently. She will be 34 years old by the time that she's eligible for parole for the first time. Also, following the release of The Crash on Netflix, the Netflix Netflix documentary, on May 15th, Steve Shirilla, Mackenzie's father, was placed on administrative leave from his job. He works for a school in Cleveland and was placed on leave after the school received comments and allegations about his conduct and moral position as seen in the documentary. The school issued a statement saying, quote, "We are investigating allegations made on social media that one of our teachers has demonstrated poor judgment. Upon learning of the allegation, the school acted immediately and placed that teacher on administrative leave," end quote. That's all. Let me know your thoughts on this. I am very curious to know all of your opinions, so I will be in the comment section. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Did you guys know that 5 people, including 2 doctors, were arrested and charged in connection to Matthew Perry's death? And his assistant was just sentenced for his role. Let's talk about it. Matthew was born in 1969 to his parents Suzanne and John. His parents divorced when he was only 9 months old, and it was his mom, who was 21 years old at the time, who primarily raised him. His dad left to go to California and pursue his acting career. He walked out on them, quote, "I'm told my father took me out of my car seat, handed me into my grandfather's arms, and with that he quietly abandoned me and my mother." Matthew's mom was a busy woman. She worked very long hours and she traveled for work, leaving Matthew with a feeling of loneliness that would stick with him throughout his entire life. But as a kid, as soon as he was able to understand that his family situation was not ideal, that he did feel lonely and like he lacked love and attention that he craved, Matthew developed a side of him, the funny side of him, that he would use as his survivor tool to keep his head above water, because maybe he didn't get the attention that he wanted and needed from his mom, but if he could make her laugh, then that meant something to him. And maybe he wasn't like the other kids because inside he felt more alone than most, but if he could make them laugh, then that was enough for him. And yeah, his day-to-day thoughts were more sad and isolated than most, but if he could make someone laugh, then he wouldn't have to think about those thoughts and he would be able to find happiness knowing that he at least made somebody else happy, even if it was just for a few seconds. Throughout the time that he was growing up, Matthew also lived with a fear that one day maybe his mom would walk out on him too, just like his father did, and those feelings became a fear of abandonment that he fought against his entire life. Even later on in his life, we see this in his romantic relationships. If he started dating someone, for example, when he dated Julia Roberts, he would self-sabotage because he would start thinking that he needed to leave them before they could get the chance to leave him first, because the thought of feeling abandoned was so unbearable to him that it was a mindset of, well, at least it was my choice and I can't be left if I'm the one choosing to walk away. And that's what happened with Julia Roberts. He was so happy in that relationship, but he felt like he never deserved her, so he left her thinking that he was protecting himself from a potential future heartbreak. Quote, "Dating Julia Roberts had been too much for me. I had been constantly certain that she was going to break up with me. Why would she not? I was not enough. I could never be enough. I was broken, bent, unlovable. So instead of facing the inevitable agony of losing her, I broke up with the beautiful and brilliant Julia Roberts." Matthew Perry was 14 years old when he had his very first drink. He was with 2 friends, his mother was at home, and he just laid outside on the grass and looked up at the stars. And for the first time in forever, he felt inner peace. The loud negative thoughts inside of his head were not there. His feelings of loneliness went away. In fact, all the feelings went away, and they were all replaced with what felt like pure bliss. He was numb, but he was so peaceful, and he liked that a lot. He was living in Canada at this time, but when he turned 15 years old, he realized that he needed a change, and he really missed his father. His dad by this point was remarried, and he had children with his new wife. But when Matthew and his mom pitched the idea of Matthew moving to California to be with his dad and his new half-siblings, it seemed like a good idea. It felt like a change of scenery would be good for him. So that's what he did. He moved to California, and there he spent more time with his father than he had his entire life. His dad was an actor, and he was also a guy who liked to have a drink. Matthew looked up to him. He started thinking about pursuing acting as his career choice to follow in his footsteps, and he also started to notice a pattern that every single day his dad would come home, and after a long day he would have a drink and say, quote, "This is the best thing that's happened to me all day," end quote. So Matthew started doing the same, but there was a difference there because when his dad stopped, Matthew couldn't. So for as long as he could remember, Matthew wanted to be a famous actor, not only because his dad was and he looked up to him, saw inspiration in him, but also because of all the attention that would come with it. Remember, he was someone that craved love and attention from his parents that he never really got, and he was also someone that wasn't confident, was lonely, and fought a lot of mental inner battles. But if he could act, he could make people laugh on camera, which was the one thing that he had always loved to do, and maybe he could get the world to love him, even if he didn't love himself. Quote, "There was steam coming out of my ears. I wanted to be famous so badly. You want the attention, you want the bucks, and you want the best seat in the restaurant," end quote. Matthew's dreams came true in 1994 when he landed the role of Chandler Bing on the show Friends. He had acted before on various projects, but this was the one role that he really wanted. He was 24 years old at the time, the youngest member of the cast. He was in desperate need of money, but he was also incredibly passionate. When he first heard about the show and about Chandler's character, all he could think about was that he was everything that Chandler was. All of Chandler's personality traits that his character needed to have on the show, Matthew Perry had in real life. So it was a role that he could so easily play because it came so natural to him. Chandler was someone that had bad luck with girls, someone who made people laugh. He was the funniest. He got uncomfortable with any type of silence. Quote, "It wasn't that I thought I could play Chandler, I was Chandler," unquote. When he auditioned for it, he didn't even bring his script with him because he had learned all of the lines by heart. But he got the role, he got the call, and it kind of saved his life. Quote, "I don't know what would have happened to me had the call gone the other way. It is not out of the realms of possibility that I may have ended up on the streets of downtown," end quote. And I do not have to explain to you guys how big of a success the show Friends was. Everyone and their mom knows the show Friends. To say that it was successful would be an understatement. The 6 cast members on the show began making a little bit over $22,000 per episode, then $75,000 per episode, and eventually they were making $1 million per episode. On top of that, the dynamic of the actors and the actresses on the show was literally everything that an actor could dream of. They were best friends in real life. They bonded, getting closer and closer throughout the years until they eventually became more like family than friends. They had so much fun on set. They all truly loved and cared for each other. They were always laughing, always smiling, and it truly created for all of them such a magical, real, raw experience. Matthew Perry was on Friends from the time that he was 24 years old to 34 years old, and he was absolutely adored by the entire world. But throughout it all, there was the same constant in him that had been there his entire life, the battles that he fought being dependent on drinks and substances. Matthew Perry was in a bad jet ski accident in 1997 while filming for a different show. He remembered losing control of the jet ski, and when he came back to, there were 40 people around him. He was hurt by this, obviously. He hurt his neck pretty bad, and for that pain, he was described Vicodin. I think that's how you pronounce it. He took it, and it did help with the pain, but it also very quickly became something that he not only wanted, but needed. Quote, "It wasn't my intention to have a problem with it, but from the start, I liked how it made me feel, and I wanted to get more." Throughout the next year of his life, Matthew Perry was taking these daily, and he was taking so many of them, and things got to the point in which he began to spiral. He was out of control and very unhealthy, in his own words, not only from the substances, but also from the drinks. He began losing weight because all of his appetite was gone. He got down to weighing 128 pounds, and he started doing things that made him not even recognize himself. For example, on Sundays, he would go to open houses for the sole purpose of going into strangers' bathrooms to see what he could find and take from their medicine cabinets. He lost himself in it completely. He first went to rehab in 1997, and from then on, he was in and out. Quote, "I have spent upwards of $7 million trying to get sober. I have been to 6,000 AA meetings. I've gone to rehab 15 times. I've been in a mental institution, gone to therapy twice a week for 30 years, been to death's door," end quote. So things were getting pretty bad, and even though he tried to be his best self on set, the cast on the show were some of his closest friends in real life, and they noticed. It's not surprising that they noticed because it would have been hard not to. Matthew Perry said that he had absolutely no memory of 3 full years in which he was filming Friends. Quote, "I don't remember 3 years of it. I was a little out of it at that time, somewhere between season 3 and season 6, end quote. But one thing that he did remember and was never able to forget was a moment between him and Jennifer Aniston when she went up to him and told him that they could smell it on his breath and that he needed help. Quote, "He is one of the most sensitive people I've ever met, more than most girls I know. His feelings get hurt. He cares what people think. It was terrifying watching someone that you care about in so much pain," end quote. Matt LeBlanc, who played Joey on the show, also tried to step in and help. Quote, "I tried to talk to him. There wasn't a response. It's such a personal struggle. They need to bottom it out on their own," end quote. Lisa also tried showing up for him, but what he was going through, those battles, it really sadly is a case of that person is not going to get better unless they want to get better. And that's a decision that they have to make all on their own. Quote, "Hard doesn't even begin to describe it. When Matthew was sick, it was not fun. We were just hopelessly standing on the sidelines. We were hurting a lot. Matthew is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. He's charming and hilarious. Most of our hard laughs came from Matthew, end quote. Things for Matthew got harder before they got better. In one instance, this is later on in his life, but because of everything that he was taking and doing, he ended up having to be put in a coma for 2 weeks, and he was given a 2% chance at survival. But it was in 2001 when something changed for the better for him, because he decided that he needed to figure out a way to live his life without the drinks, without the substances, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to, or else he knew for a fact that he wasn't going to be alive for much longer. Quote, I can't describe it because bigger things were taking place that I can't put into words. I didn't get sober because I felt like it. I got sober because I was worried I was going to die the next day, end quote. So one day, while he was laying alone in a hotel room, he called his parents and he admitted that he needed help. He flew back to California and his parents took him to another rehab center. Quote, it was scary. I didn't want to die, but I'm grateful for how bad it got. It only made me more adamant about trying to get better, end quote. So after Friends ended in 2004, Matthew Perry spoke publicly about his struggles that he had while filming for the show and about how he was doing better and about his intentions to continue doing better, saying that you can't have a problem for 30 years and expect it to be fixed in 28 days. Quote, you don't recover from what I went through overnight. It's a day-to-day process. So he worked on himself, continued getting the help that he needed, and decided that the one thing that he knew for a fact that he could be good at was helping people. Even if he still faced times in which he didn't know how to help himself, he prided himself in always being able to help others. In 2013, he ended up opening a 5,500 square foot property in Malibu as a sober living facility for men, and he did just that. He helped a lot of people. Quote, when I die, I don't want friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want helping others to be the first thing that's mentioned, and I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that, end quote. But despite his massive efforts to fight against it all, Matthew Perry struggled badly in the last months of his life. In the fall of 2023, he fell back into old habits, and it was October 28th of 2023 that would become one of the hardest days for everyone who knew and loved him. Matthew Perry was found deceased at his home in LA at the age of 54 as a result of accidental ketamine. Matthew Perry had been undergoing legitimate ketamine infusion therapy to manage his depression and anxiety, but toxicology reports showed that the level of it in his system were far beyond what would be medically appropriate. Because of that, in May of 2024, authorities opened up a formal investigation into not only how he had obtained it, but why there were such large amounts of it in his system. So, the legitimate ketamine infusion therapy was exactly that. It was legitimate, but because it was actually helping his depression and anxiety, he wanted more of it so that he could feel the benefits from it 24/7, not just when he was doing the therapy. And when his treating physicians refused to increase his dose, Matthew Perry then looked to get it elsewhere, first through 2 Southern California doctors. 42-year-old Dr. Salvador Plasencia from Santa Monica was thrilled when Matthew came to him for this because he knew that he was famous, he knew that he was rich, and he wanted money. But he was clueless, honestly, about what he was doing, so he reached out to another physician, 54-year-old Dr. Mark Chavez from San Diego, and he tells him, look, if we can provide Matthew Perry with what he's requesting, we are going to be able to make a lot of money. So that's exactly what they do. They start texting each other, so excited about the idea of how much money they can make, saying, quote, I wonder how much this moron will pay. Let's find out, end quote. Then they begin making false representations to a wholesale distributor that will sell them large amount of substances that they then plan on selling to Matthew. They write fraudulent prescriptions in the name of a former patient without that patient's knowledge or consent. Then they get the stuff, distribute it to Matthew outside of the usual course of professional practice and without legitimate medical purpose, without the proper safety equipment, and without properly monitoring Matthew Perry after doing these procedures. Like they once gave it to him through a procedure that they did inside of a parked car in a beach parking lot, completely going against any and all medical training that they had. And then because those two didn't have the time to be with Matthew Perry at all times every single day, they loop in Matthew's live-in assistant, 59-year-old Kenneth, so that he could take care of providing everything to Matthew Perry when they didn't have the time. And that's what happened on October 28th of 2023. Kenneth did the procedure, has zero medical knowledge, by the way, and then he leaves. And Matthew Perry then passes away. When this happens, this is headline news, of course, and all three of them immediately start communicating about how they need to hide their involvement in this, falsifying documents, making up false treatment plans just in case they did need to explain something. One literally texting the other, quote, delete all of our messages, end quote. But authorities figure it out and they arrest a total of 5 people. Dr. Mark Chavez, Dr. Salvador Plasencia, Kenneth, 54-year-old Eric Fleming, and a 41-year-old woman, I think you pronounce her name Josephine. those last two played a huge part in supplying the substance. Authorities conducted search warrants and found more than enough evidence that all of these people had been involved in fraudulently obtaining and distributing mass amount of substances that they should have never been able to, and every single one of them was found to be involved in illegal activity. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram described the pattern at a press conference, saying that as Matthew Perry's dependence deepened, he began prioritizing speed and cost over safety, eventually falling victim to people who were eager about taking advantage of him and his money. An attorney also stated, quote, "These defendants cared more about profiting off of Mr. Perry than caring for his well-being, selling dangerous substances, or gambling with other people's lives over greed. This case, along with our many other prosecutions who caused death, send a clear message that we will hold accountable for the deaths that they caused," end quote. Kenneth, the personal assistant, was sentenced just yesterday, May 27th of 2026, to 41 months, 3 years, and 5 months in federal prison. Eric Fleming, one of the middlemen, was also just recently sentenced to 2 years in a federal prison. The woman, I think you pronounce her name Justine, was sentenced last month to 15 years in federal prison, more than all of the other defendants combined. At sentencing, she said, quote, "These were not mistakes, they were horrible decisions. My choices shattered people's lives and the lives of their family and friends," end quote. Dr. Placencia was sentenced in December of 2025 to 2 years and 6 months in prison, and Dr. Chavez was sentenced in December of 2025 to 8 months of home confinement and 300 hours of community service. Yeah, everything about it is sad from beginning to end, really. But that is all from me today. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm curious what you have to say. I'm sure a lot of you, if not most of you, also completely adored Matthew Perry like the rest of the world. But yeah, thanks for spending time with me today and for listening to his story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. For years, millions of Americans tuned in every single week to watch the Duggar family live their lives on television. Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar had 19 children, all with names starting with a J, raised in a household of faith and strict rules. The show was one of TLC's most watched programs of all time, and the family was looked at to be wholesome and relatable. They seemed to the millions of people who watched them like proof that a certain kind of life was possible. But then the truth started to come out, and it did not stop. And now members, plural, of the Duggar family are facing very serious, disturbing criminal charges. James Robert Duggar, known to everyone as Jim Bob, was born on July 18th, 1965 in Springdale, Arkansas. He married a woman called Michelle in 1984 when they were both teenagers. Jim Bob was 19, Michelle was only 17. They began their life together in the small, close-knit community in northwestern Arkansas, and they got deeply embedded in the conservative Christian world that would eventually come to define every single thing that they did. Early in their marriage, Michelle fell pregnant, but they unfortunately lost that baby, and she and Jim Bob came to believe that the reason for losing that baby was because of the use of birth control. After consulting their pastor, they made a big decision that would change the trajectory of their lives. They would never, ever, ever use contraception again. They would now, quote, let God decide how many children they had. What followed was 19 children born between 1988 and 2009. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing every single name correctly. I'm trying my best. But Joshua, Jana, John David, Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Joseph, Josiah, Joanna, Jedida, Jeremiah, Jason, James, Justin, Jackson, Johanna, Jennifer, Jordan, Grace, and finally Josie. And the dynamic of their family was a very close-knit one, but very strict. All of the children were homeschooled and had limited access to TV and the internet. They were also not big on conventional dating. Dating to them looked different, meaning no physical contact before marriage, including kissing, and they pretty much believed that men were above women in every single way. That women belonged completely to their husbands, that daughters belonged completely to their fathers until marriage, that physical discipline of children was not only acceptable but spiritually required, and that a woman's biggest role in life was to please men, essentially. And to their community, they were a model family, but to the outside world, they would become a phenomenon. The Duggar family first appeared on television in September of 2005 in a 1-hour special on the Discovery Health channel titled 14 Children and Pregnant Again. The program introduced America to Jim Bob, his wife Michelle, and their family as they prepared to welcome baby number 15 into the world. The reaction was incredible. Viewers were absolutely fascinated, not only by the sheer scale of the family, but everything that they did and the way that they operated. did. In other words, they gained fans quickly, so then there were follow-up specials on them, and then the audience just kept growing. So much so that in September of 2008, TLC launched 17 Kids and Counting as a full weekly series. They gave them a show of their own that would eventually change from 17 to 18 Kids and Counting, and then 19 Kids and Counting as Michelle continued to birth babies. Over 10 seasons and 229 episodes, the show averaged 3.2 million viewers, making it one of TLC's most watched programs of all time. And the show was just about the family's daily life, the oldest daughter's cooking and caring for the youngest siblings, the relationships, the weddings, the first kisses at the weddings, and the births as the kids got married and started their own families. Jim Bob and Michelle were presented as devoted parents. Their children were polite, helpful, happy. And then the family also became politically active. The eldest son, Josh Duggar, ended up moving to Washington, D.C. to work in politics. Jim Bob ran for Senate in 2002, and for the Arkansas state legislature, the family endorsed political candidates and appeared at campaign events very open about their extremely controversial beliefs. But the point is that they were not just a reality TV family, they kind of transformed to be their own brand. But while America was forming a strong fan base for the Duggar family on television, something deeply troubling had already happened inside of their home, something that Jim Bob and Michelle knew about, dealt with privately, and chose not to disclose to neither law enforcement nor the public for over a decade. In July of 2002, Jim Bob Duggar told the Arkansas State Police in a later report that he had learned that year that his eldest son, Josh, then 14 years old, had expressed extremely disturbing behavior towards a female child, his sister, while she slept. Jim Bob said that he disciplined his son, but he did not call the police, and the behavior did not stop. In March of 2003, he was accused of doing the same thing to other sisters, the same things happening to them, sometimes while they slept, sometimes while they were awake, but on at least 7 different occasions. One saying that she had been standing in the laundry room when Josh walked in and tried to put his hands under her dress. Another particularly disturbing incident involved Josh reading to his then 5-year-old sister as she sat on his lap. He then put his hands in areas that they should never be. She ran out, told her dad. Jim Bob, according to the later police report, then met with church elders and told them what was going on. But still, nobody contacted law enforcement. That same month, Jim Bob and Michelle sent Josh to what they described to be at the time a Christian counseling program in Little Rock. When police later interviewed Michelle about this program, she acknowledged that it was not a legitimate treatment center, saying that Josh had been simply sent away to be with a family friend, where he performed hard physical labor, I guess for 4 months, but he received no professional mental health treatment of any kind. When Josh returned home in July of 2003, Jim Bob and church elders took him to meet with an Arkansas state trooper named Joseph Hutchins, but not because he was in law enforcement. They took him to him because he was strictly a family friend, a personal family friend of the Duggar family. And apparently this state trooper gave Josh what the later police report described to be a very stern talk, but took no official action, filed no report, and made no referral to Child Protective Services. Josh then apologized to the victims, most of which were his sisters, and then that was that. The family considered the matter resolved. Fast forward 4 years to 2007, that state trooper, the family friend Joseph Hutchins, was convicted on CP charges. For that, he is currently serving a 56-year prison sentence. Just an important detail to mention, in my opinion, because the man that Jim Bob Duggar had chosen to give a stern talk to his son turned out to be guilty of disturbing, disgusting behavior himself. Then we get to 2006. The family flies out to be on Oprah Winfrey's show. Everything is going according to plan until production receives an email from a person that is saying, listen, the family is not who you think they are. Josh Duggar has SA'd his little sister amongst other children. The parents know, they're hiding it, and they are never going to let this information be released to the public. Just thought you should know before you have them on your show. Filming is then canceled. Production takes that email to law enforcement. Turns out law enforcement had received a very similar email claiming the same things, but still no charges are filed. Then the Duggar family goes on to sign with TLC for their show to air on TV with absolutely no public knowledge of any of the allegations against them. And like I said, in September of 2008, 17 Kids and Counting premieres on TLC with Josh Duggar as a featured cast member, presenting himself to millions of people to be this devoted Christian husband and soon-to-be father. It would not be until 2015 that the information would be made public. By that point, Josh was married and with 4 children of his own. In May of 2015, In Touch magazine publishes the police report, the article that detailed everything. The incidents from 2002, 2003, the victims who were his little sisters, the family response, the inadequate program that Josh was sent to, the meeting with the trooper who would be later convicted of CP, and the extremely disturbing allegations against Josh. It all comes out. Within hours, the Duggar family's carefully constructed public image was in deep trouble. Josh Duggar issued a statement that same day, quote, 12 years ago, as a young teenager, I acted inexclusively. I have since then been humbled and humiliated by the horrific nature of my past conduct. I sought forgiveness from those who I had wronged and asked for and received forgiveness from my parents. We spoke with the authorities where I confessed my wrongdoing, and my parents arranged for me and those affected by my actions to receive counseling, end quote. 3 days later, TLC announced that it was pulling all episodes of 19 Kids and Counting from its schedule. Quote, we are deeply saddened and troubled by this heartbreaking situation, and our thoughts and prayers are with the family and victims at this difficult time, end quote. For that statement, TLC faced an immediate and intense backlash, in part because on the night the story broke, the network had been running a marathon of 19 Kids and Counting episodes. Critics were very quick to point out that the network had been profiting from a family that it clearly fully failed to investigate. Jim Bob and Michelle then sit down for an interview with then Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly for an interview that aired in 2 parts. In said interview, they defended their handling of the situation, described Josh's behavior as a dark and difficult time that had ultimately brought them closer to God. And they expressed frustration that the police report had been made public. Michelle said, quote, we had a situation in our home and we handled it. Our children were safe, end quote. The sisters, who were the victims, also got very upset that the information was now made public. They were, too, openly critical about the decision that was made to release the police report. Quote, I couldn't believe what was going on. I said, what right do you have to do this? We're victims. They can't do this to us, end quote. Then Josh's wife makes a statement saying that this information is, yes, shocking, but not to her because she had already known about this. She found out 2 years after their engagement. But she states that Josh has received counseling that changed his life, saying that he is no longer the person who once essayed his little sisters. TLC officially canceled 19 Kids and Counting on July 16th of 2015. However, 5 months later, TLC launched a new show. It was initially titled Jill and Jessa Counting On, and that show was, I guess, created to give Jill and Jessa, Josh's sisters, a platform to tell their stories in the aftermath of Josh's revelations. But within a few episodes, that show basically became what 19 Kids and Counting had been. It pretty much became a show about the entire Duggar family, their courtships, their weddings, and their babies. Josh was not seen on screen, but everyone else remained. Counting On ran for 11 seasons. It made a lot of money, not only for TLC, but also for the Duggar family. In 2018, Jill and her husband Derek left the show and later publicly revealed that none of the adult children from the Duggar family had ever been paid directly for their appearances on it, saying that all the money from TLC flowed to Jim Bob, who controlled the family's finances. This new revelation then opened a new and deeply uncomfortable conversation about the power that Jim Bob wielded over his entire family. And it was then that a lot of conversations started happening of people beginning to ask questions about what the family dynamic was really like. And people of the public felt really confused as to why this family was being portrayed as genuine and wholesome when in reality they seemed to be a family who lived in a system of manipulation and control. But perhaps the biggest shock came in 2021. On the morning of April 29th of 2021, federal agents from Homeland Security Investigations arrived at Wholesale Motor Cars, a used car dealership in Springdale, Arkansas, owned and operated by Josh Duggar. They seized multiple electronic devices and arrested 33-year-old Josh Duggar. He was taken into custody and held without bond. The charges against him were initially sealed. However, very soon after they were unsealed, and it was revealed that Josh Duggar had been charged with 2 federal counts: receiving CSAM material and possessing CSAM material. The material involved children under the age of 12. Josh pleaded not guilty and was released from custody in May. During that time, he stayed with family and friends, a pastor and his wife, while he awaited trial, under the condition that he had no unsupervised contact with minors. The details that emerged from that federal investigation were devastating, to say the least. In a pre-trial hearing, a special agent from the Department of Homeland Security testified that the material found on a computer belonging to Josh Duggar included files that were among the, quote, top 5 worst I have ever had to examine, end quote, in his 11 years on working on similar cases, including videos of children as young as 18 months old. They were described to be way beyond just disturbing, not only CSAM, but also child torture. Josh had used some sort of hidden system on his work computer and a peer-to-peer file sharing program to download and view the material, taking significant measures to conceal his activity from the monitoring software the family used. The material found included, quote, 600 or more images. TLC canceled Counting On in June of 2021, 2 months after Josh's arrest. The network then cut all ties with the Duggar family entirely. Josh Duggar's federal trial began in November of 2021. Over 6 days, 10 witnesses testified. The prosecution's argument clearly showing that Josh had deliberately downloaded and distributed CSAM using that software that he installed on his computer and created a password-protected hidden partition for, specifically to hide his activity. Not only that, but Josh had distributed that material to an undercover law enforcement officer. And what was his defense's argument, you may be wondering? Oh, well, they just said that it wasn't true. They just said that it wasn't him. Their main argument was that someone else must have used Josh's computer. Thankfully, in December of 2021, after less than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Josh guilty on both counts. He showed absolutely no visible emotion as the verdict was read, and he was sentenced to 151 months. 12 and a half years in federal prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release. His current release date is set for October 2nd, 2032. He will then be 44 years old. And if you think that that is the end of the video, it's not, because in March of 2026, there is another arrest. 31-year-old Joseph Duggar was arrested on March 18th, 2026 and charged with 2 counts, one involving the SA of a victim under 12 years old. He's accused of SAing a 9-year-old girl on multiple times during a family vacation to Panama City Beach, Florida in 2020. Quote, Bay County investigators were contacted by a detective regarding a report of past SA. The 14-year-old victim participated in a forensic interview where she disclosed several incidents involving Duggar that occurred during a family vacation in Panama City Beach when she was only 9 years old. According to the Bay County Sheriff's Office, the victim reported that Joseph repeatedly asked her to sit on his lap, sit beside him on a couch, and cover them with a blanket. I think you can put together what he did / tried to do when that was happening. So this girl goes to her dad, tells him what happens. The child's father then confronts Joseph directly about this, and guess what? Joseph admits to it. Not only that, he says that yes, those things happened, even confirming that, quote, his intentions were not pure. Police then had the father call Joseph again, but this time with a detective listening on the line, and then Joseph admits to it a second time. But then he pleads not guilty and he requests a jury trial. So this is a case that's still ongoing. But this is now the second Duggar son in the same family from the same household, raised under the same religious framework, to face serious child SA allegations. But that's still not all, because 2 days after Josh's arrest, 27-year-old Kendra, his wife, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child and 4 counts of false imprisonment, both in the second degree. Allegedly, when Joseph was arrested, there was a welfare check done on the kids, and it was found allegedly that 2 bedrooms had the locks on the outside of the doors instead of on the inside, suggesting that Kendra, Joseph, or both used those rooms to lock away their kids. They both pleaded not guilty, and these are both still ongoing cases. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. We'll see what happens, but let me know if you guys have heard about this. Let me know if you're keeping up to date on it, and I'm sure I'll make a follow-up video on this. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. If you saw this TikTok, you'd probably think, okay, yeah, normal video, nothing stands out about it. But then you learn the backstory behind it and what's happening in just the other room as this girl is deciding to record this TikTok. And it's evil. There's no other word for it. It's literally vile, pure evil. Nicola Priest was a teenager living in the UK with her mom, sister, and her stepdad. They were living just outside of Birmingham. And she was living a life of a typical girl her age. She was posting on social media, doing her makeup, going out with her friends. She had an active TikTok profile where she would post videos of herself dancing, makeup tutorials, just little clips of her everyday life. But her entire world changed when she found out that she was pregnant at 17 years old. Nicola gave birth to a baby girl in 2017, and she named her Kaylee Jade Priest. The father was not in the picture, so of course the baby lived in the same house as Nicola and her family, and Kaylee was the cutest little girl. Anyone who met her outside of the family would tell you that she was just the sweetest little girl. On social media, specifically on TikTok, Nicola began posting videos of her daughter. The two of them would do dances together, they would play, they would hang out, and if you watched the videos, you would probably think, oh, cute, mother, daughter, so sweet. Wrong. Nicola was the worst mom because she could not have cared any less about her daughter if she tried. Nicola never bathed her, fed fed her, changed her diapers, and didn't play with her. She honestly hardly even talked to her, and when she did spend time with her, it was only because she had to. Luckily for baby Kaylee, Nicola's mom and sister stepped up to take care of her. They did absolutely everything in their power to raise her and care for her and give her everything that a baby needs. So Kaylee was taken care of, but not by Nicola in the slightest. When Nicola had her, she pretty much just completely disregarded her, or she was yelling at her or punishing her, all while making two other things her priorities: social media and boys. Nicola was also not a great daughter. She never listened to her mom. She went out, she would leave Kaylee at home, very much so prioritizing hanging out with random boys and doing things that I guess she considered to be fun. By 2019, Nicola fell pregnant again, and she gave birth to now her second child sometime that year. The father was her boyfriend at the time, a guy called Daniel, and Daniel was a good guy. He was excited to become a dad. He loved being able to be in Kaylee's life. He had good intentions, and he definitely cared significantly more for Kaylee than Nicola ever did. At some point throughout their relationship, Nicola ends up getting in a really bad fight with her mom, and I think her sister as well, because they're just trying to tell her to treat Kaylee like a toddler should be treated, but Nicola just refused to listen. She got super defensive. She moved out. She took Kaylee with her and then told her family members, aka mom and sister, that they would never see her again. She moved in with Daniel into his family's house, and the two of them later on got their own apartment. But getting into that fight with her mom and her sister was terrible, because they were two out of the three people who seemed to actually care and love Kaylee. But the third person was Daniel, so there was still a little bit of hope in the air that even though Kaylee sadly would no longer be allowed to see her aunt and her grandma, she still had Daniel and his family. But sadly, that would not last long either, because being in a relationship with someone like Nicola, who pretty much only cares about herself, wasn't something that Daniel could see for himself long term. As much as he cared for Kaylee, I think he realized that being with Nicola was just too much. I think I said 2019 earlier, but the baby was born in 2020. So after their baby was born in 2020, they broke up, and Daniel did whatever he could to still provide and still be in the baby's life, even when him and Nicola were completely over. He let Nicola and Kaylee stay at the apartment, and he moved back in with his family, but they worked out an agreement in which Daniel would take the baby on the weekends and Nicola would have him on weekdays. But I told you that one of Nicola's biggest priorities was boys, so it didn't take long for her to jump into a new relationship. In 2020, Nicola got into a relationship with Callum Redfern, a 21-year-old guy who she had known for a little bit and one that she was reportedly infatuated with. Callum, not a good guy. He was reckless, he was selfish, had severe anger issues, also not on the same page at all as Nicola in regards to their relationship, really. Well, it was very much so a relationship in her eyes. She was very much my man, you are mine, let's be together forever. I will give you whatever you want. And he was very much, a man has needs, you meet my needs, but that's about the only thing that you do for me. So whatever thing they had to him was very much physical versus in Nicola's eyes was very much emotional. But Callum, also great at not caring, so he pretty much just led Nicola on, let her believe whatever she wanted to believe. So their relationship was weird and the opposite of healthy, but it was different in the way that Nicola now not only cared about herself, she actually cared a lot about Callum. Yet that meant that Kaylee, her 3-year-old daughter, got even less attention from her, if that's even possible. Not only did Nicola not care about Kaylee, she often yelled at her, she called her names, she would punish her. I mean, you would think that this 3-year-old little girl was her biggest enemy by the way that she treated her. Add to that, Callum and his selfishness and his anger issues, it was quite the perfect recipe for disaster. Neighbors living below Nicola's apartment at times heard loud noises coming from upstairs, followed by Kaylee crying. On one occasion, a neighbor allegedly heard Kaylee crying, and Nicola say afterwards, quote, "I'll just say that she fell off the bed," end quote. Things in that apartment were bad, much worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Later on, text messages were revealed that showed just how angry Nicola always was at Kaylee, the most innocent little girl who just wanted to be loved and cared for by her own mother. In one exchange, Nicola texted Callum, quote, "I'm gonna her because she keeps leaving the living room or going in the kitchen, so I've hit her and smacked her for going to the bathroom in her nappy," end quote. Callum's response to that was, quote, "Good, give her one from me." Nicola replied to that saying, "I will, babe." Just days after those text messages, the horrible events of today's case would occur. The last full day of Kaylee's life began ordinarily enough. On Saturday, August 8th of 2020, CCTV cameras recorded Nicola and Kaylee leaving their apartment. And as per usual, Nicola seems extremely uninterested in her. Kaylee is looking at her the entire time. Nicola does not look at her once, completely ignoring her. She walks in front of Kaylee, keeping her distance with almost no physical or verbal interaction between the two of them the entire time. When they returned back home, Kaylee appeared well, walking, talking, moving normally. Oh, and also the baby this weekend was with Daniel, so it was only Nicola, Callum, and Kaylee now at their apartment. At around 7 p.m. that night, Kaylee was put to bed. Nicola and Callum were in the living room along with a friend that Callum had over, but like many children her age, Kaylee did not want to go to sleep. She wanted to stay up. She wanted to play, so she began to cry, calling out, wanting to be let out of her room. But Nicola and Callum, they wanted to be intimate with each other right then and there. Why not? Your daughter is literally crying out for you, and there's another person. You have a friend over too. But they started kissing or whatever, but Kaylee was still crying. And they got so incredibly angry and irritated, they both stopped what they were doing. They entered Kaylee's bedroom and they punished her physically without holding back for interrupting them. Afterwards, they leave her in her room. They go back to doing whatever they were doing until they were done, and then Callum, along with his friend, leave the apartment completely. So now it's just Kaylee who's locked in her bedroom and her mom, Nicola. Nicola goes back into Kaylee's room. She sees that she is very clearly, obviously not okay because of everything that they did to her, sees that she is throwing up uncontrollably. 3 years old, by the way, and what does she do? She closes the door and she gets on her phone, completely and absolutely ignoring the horrible state that Kaylee was in. What exactly happened in that apartment has never been fully established because both Nicola and Callum ended up blaming each other entirely, but the injuries that Kaylee sustained tell us enough. Kaylee had catastrophic injuries to her chest and abdomen, a torn intestine, fractured ribs, a fractured sternum, and a deflated lung. Expert witnesses described the injuries as producing the type of damage usually seen as a result of a high-speed car crash. Other experts later told the court that it was also comparable to injuries that a child might suffer from falling approximately 30 feet onto concrete. That night, those are the injuries that Kaylee had and felt and was going through, left alone in her bedroom, while her mom, 22-year-old Nicola, was in the living room. She was texting Callum that she loved him, that it was so nice to see him, and then, out of boredom, I guess, Nicola picks up her phone and she starts making TikToks. Yep, she props up her phone and she starts doing dances. No care in the world. And then she just goes to her bedroom and eventually falls asleep. Kaylee Jade spent the night in that condition, using every last bit of energy that she had to try and survive. She was alone. She was slowly giving up. Her little body couldn't handle it, and no one called for help. It was not until the following day, August 9th of 2020, at around 11 a.m., Nicola Priest called an ambulance for her daughter. She calls and says that she thinks that her daughter fell and hit her head, that she's not breathing, and that she's turning blue. The operator on the phone tells her to do CPR. She says that she's doing CPR and that it's not working. Later we find out she never tried to do CPR, and Kaylee was already gone by the time the ambulance arrived. There were a total of 68 injuries on her body, most of which were caused that night, but some dated back 2 months earlier. Medical staff was able to determine that because of the way that they looked, meaning that this awful treatment of Kaylee had been going on for weeks, months before that final night. Authorities arrested both Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern, and you will not be shocked to hear that anything and everything Nicola told authorities were lies. She was full of fake stories, attempting to make everything seem like it was an accident, but it was obvious to any person that saw her and spoke to her that she was a mother who did not in the slightest care about her daughter. Callum tried claiming that he wasn't even in the apartment, that he didn't stay the night there that night, and that he knew nothing, which is true, but he was fully responsible as well. Both of them fully denying any responsibility, and eventually both of them fully turning on each other. They must have realized, I guess, that authorities were not buying into their lies, so instead they pointed the finger of blame entirely at each other. When asked how Kaylee's passing had affected him, Callum only responded with, quote, "It's not my child, it's not really affected me," end quote. I'm happy to say that when they did eventually go to trial, the jury wasn't believing anything that they were saying. CCTV footage, witness testimony, text message records, and reports from several medical experts played a crucial role in proving the case. The prosecution's argument was pretty straightforward, that on the night of August 8th, both defendants were alone with Kaylee when she sustained her fatal injuries. Both had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. Both had documented history of this kind of behavior towards her, and neither called for help. On August 5th of 2021, the jury convicted both Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern on the manslaughter of Kaylee Jade Priest. They were found not guilty of murder because of a lack of evidence, because they were unable to determine exactly who did what and what part they played. They were found not guilty of murder, but instead guilty of manslaughter, which is crazy to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well. Nicola was also found guilty of a separate charge relating to Kaylee's older injuries. She was sentenced to only 15 years in prison for manslaughter and 3 years for the second charge, and Callum was sentenced to only 14 years. When Nicola's mom, Kaylee's grandmother, found out, she was absolutely shattered. As you can imagine, she had been the only one, along with Nicola's sister, that ever tried to raise the alarm on how bad, how awful of a mother Nicola was, and they had been the only ones that had loved Kaylee since the moment she was born. This is a statement from her, quote, "I could never stop staring at that smile on her beautiful face. I loved every moment watching her develop to nearly school age. Kaylee J deserved to show the world who she could have been and what greatness she could have brought to this world. Nanny will forever hold you in her heart," end quote. Yeah, I really have no words. Also baffled at the sentence that they got. But that is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to little Kaylee's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. That's a kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. One woman and at least 5 men in a hotel room in London in Canada. In the early hours of the morning, a young woman known only publicly as EM experienced something that left her with trauma that she would likely have to deal with for the rest of her life. The case went to trial, and by the time that it ended in 2025, it had consumed Canadian hockey and left people asking the most uncomfortable question a country can ask about the sport that it loves the most, which is, what exactly are we protecting? It was June 2018 when members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Championship team, the young men who had won gold for Canada earlier that year, gathered in London for a Hockey Canada Foundation gala and golf tournament celebrating their victory. They were celebrated, honored, treated like heroes. Hockey is huge in Canada. It's a big deal, so bringing home a win naturally left people of the public putting these men up on a pedestal. The 5 men at the center of what followed were Michael McLeod, Carter Hart, Alex Formanton, Dylan Dube, and Cal Foote. Back in 2018, they were ranging from ages 19 to 20. By the time that this case actually goes to trial, they were 27, 28 years old. All were on their way to professional careers within the NHL. They win gold. Canada loves them. The entire team attends this gala, which is meant to be like an award ceremony of sorts, but essentially it was a huge party to celebrate their big win. Everyone is on cloud 9. It's mid-June. They go out. They're ready to have a fun night. While they're out, one of the team members, Michael McLeod, starts talking to a 20-year-old woman. They're hitting it off, so he says, "Hey, why don't we go back to my hotel room?" The girl, known as EM, agrees. CCTV footage captures them leaving. They go back to his hotel room. They do it because they're both into it and they want to, and then EM gets up to go to the bathroom. She is not wearing anything. When she comes out, there are now several hockey teammates walking in the room, which naturally catches EM off guard because why and how did their room now turn into the hangout room? Come to find out, Michael McLeod had texted his teammates basically offering up EM to them, saying, "If you want to do anything to her or with her, come to my room." EM feels vulnerable because, again, wearing nothing, she's now in a room with 10 to 15 strangers who she does not know. Yeah, she agreed to go there with Michael McLeod in the first place, but she's now in a situation that she never expected to be in. When EM returns home later that night, her mom can tell that something isn't right. EM has been crying, and I assume that she looks very clearly upset, to the point that her mom asks her what happened, and all EM can say at that point is, "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." So her mom, in her gut, although EM has not told her the full story, makes the decision to call authorities to say, "Something's happened to my daughter. She was in this hotel room with all of these guys. She's not okay. Something happened, and we need to figure out what it was." It's hard for her to talk about, but eventually EM opens up and tells authorities what happened in that room. She says what I already told you about voluntarily going there with Michael McLeod, engaging in intimate activities with him, but then she says that the rest of the team members unexpectedly showed up, and then the entire environment in that room changed. EM says that she was scared. She was also not in the right state of mind because she had previously been out that night with friends, but she says that the men then took control over the situation and forced her to do things, certain things to them and for them that she did not feel comfortable doing. But out of fear, EM felt like the only safe option was to do what they wanted. Prosecutors would later argue that the players did do what they wanted without taking the necessary steps to ensure that EM was voluntarily consenting to certain acts. Trigger warning, this is not easy to listen to. These acts included things such as spitting on her behind and essaying her in multiple ways, several of them taking turns and asking who wanted to do what next. EM also stated that the men were speaking amongst themselves, talking about golf clubs that they had in the room because they had that golf tournament the next morning, asking if they should insert them and wondering, quote, if she could take a whole one, end quote. She says that a lot of team members were in the room, but later specifically spoke about the 5 that I mentioned as the ones who actively participated in said acts and commanded her on what to do next. Also saying others were just on the bed on their phone phones, eating food like nothing was happening. EM says that she felt scared, I feel like any person would be, and says that she's already not the kind of person that's good at standing up for herself. So when everything was happening, she was already having trouble registering what was actually happening to her. She couldn't really register, let alone say no, and then standing up and trying to leave the room. She disassociated, letting her mind go and quote, just let my body do what it needed to do to keep me safe, unquote. She said when she did attempt to walk towards the door to leave, when she attempted to leave the room, she was quote, directed, manipulated, and intimidated into remaining there. She also said that at times she heard the men say, quote, she's crying, don't let her leave, don't let her leave. When they were done, I guess, the men told her to leave the room because they had the golf tournament the next morning and they needed to wake up early for that. But not before she was allegedly forced into making a pair of videos, 2 videos, in which she stated that everything that happened was consensual. The videos are only seconds long, but in them you can hear a man's voice saying, everything that just happened was consensual, right? You wanted to do this, right? She says yes, and then the video cuts off. Absolutely terrifying and so disturbing, because if you are going to argue that what you did was consensual, which is what they would go on to argue, why did you take that video to begin with? That's weird behavior, because if you do something with a person that wants to do the same thing, you are not then going to pull out your phone, put their camera in front of their face and say, hey, you wanted to do this, right? Say that you wanted it, because why on earth would you need that? That in itself, in my opinion, says that you knew that what you were doing was wrong, because at the very least, you were not sure. If you felt the need to ask for confirmation, then you were not sure, and that in itself should have been your answer. And the fact that there were so many people inside of that room and not one person said, hey, this is messed up, let's stop. Not a single person. Insanity, but it gets worse. So EM and her mom report this to authorities back in 2018, which prompts 2 investigations to be opened. A local police investigation into the group SA and one with Hockey Canada. EM's mom's boyfriend at the time had also called Hockey Canada's HR department himself to report the alleged SA that occurred. Former Hockey Canada CEO Tom Rennie, as well as the president Scott Smith, later said that they learned about what happened when they arrived back home from the gala. So some teammates are interviewed. Alex Formanton, one who EM claimed that he took her to the bathroom specifically to do things just the 2 of them away from the group, says in his interview, just looking at his face makes me nauseous, to be honest with you. Not the point, because what he says is worse, right? So in short, he says, oh, EM was actually the one that was begging us to do things with her. We didn't want to, and she got really embarrassed and frustrated, and I think a little bit angry, because I don't know, I think that she thought that we thought that she wasn't hot enough because we didn't want to do anything with her in front of our teammates, because that's weird and that would have made us feel uncomfortable. But she was mad that we didn't think that she was hot enough. So yeah, I mean, like, we did stuff, but she was the one who kept asking for it. Michael McLeod, the guy who EM did agree to go back to the hotel room, says, yeah, this was all her idea. She was the one that told me to invite all of my teammates into the room. She said that it was a fantasy that she had or something. He also said that he texted his teammates to come to his room because he had food. That's all he says, that he texts them, hey, I ordered food. If you want to come eat, come to my room. Which is a straight up lie, because what he actually texts his roommates is, quote, who wants to be in a 3-way quick 209 Mikey. I'm not exaggerating, that's what they said. And then in early 2019, police closed the investigation, and in 2020, Hockey Canada closed their investigation. No charges, no arrest, no anything. Michael shows the videos that he had of EM saying that she did give consent, and authorities literally said, oh, so she did want this to happen. Case closed, nothing to see here. EM was devastated. She felt so defeated. I cannot imagine what she felt when the investigations were closed. This is a quote from later on, but quote, she's never really experienced not being believed like this before. She agreed to do everything asked of her by the criminal justice system. She spoke to the police whenever requested. She reviewed her evidence. She prepared her testimony. She answered every question. She spoke with intelligence and from the heart, yet it was still not enough. So then we get to 2022. EM files a statement of claim seeking $3.5 million in damages from Hockey Canada, the Canadian Hockey League, and 8 players, quote, including but not limited to members of the Canada's men's junior hockey team from the 2018 World Junior team, end quote. She files it, and then Hockey Canada quietly settles. They reach an out-of-court settlement with EM for an undisclosed amount. Mind you, this is not public knowledge yet. Everything that has happened without it being reported on in the news. The public has no knowledge of it yet. That same month, former CEO Tom Rennie hears that a Canadian news outlet would be breaking the story about the SA allegations and the quiet settlement. And that's what happens. A reporter with TCN breaks the news to the public for the first time, mentioning EM's SA allegations, the lawsuit that she filed, and the settlement. Canada's former Minister of Sport has said since then that that month was the first time that she heard about all of this, right? So she's like, well, how did Hockey Canada settle? Like, where did the money come from? So she orders an audit from Hockey Canada to find out out where the funds came from, because if they used money from their general fund, part of that money could be like registration fees, which are paid by minor hockey families across the country, meaning that parents whose children played in these hockey leagues across Canada could have, without knowledge, helped pay to make an SA case against the national team go away, which is messed up. So she orders this audit to make sure that no public funds were used in the settlement, and from there she announces a freeze in Hockey Canada's federal funding until the investigation is completed. Turns out public funds were used in the settlement. According to Hockey Canada, they had a national equity fund that they kept in case they had to use those funds for, quote, a broad range of expenses related to safety, wellness, and equity initiatives, end quote. Hockey Canada quickly announces from there that the fund would no longer be used to settle SA claims moving forward. While all of that mess is going on, the London police then announced that they are going to be reopening their investigation to conduct an internal review of the investigation that took place back in 2018. Hockey Canada also says that they would reopen their investigation and that in the meantime, all players from that 2018 team would have to cooperate or else they could face getting banned from future Hockey Canada activities. On June 30th, Tom Rennie retires as the CEO, appoints a new CEO, but then that CEO is forced out and its entire board of directors then resigns. In July of 2023, Catherine Henderson is announced as the new Hockey Canada president and CEO. In January of 2024, news reporters report that the 5 players, the 5 that we have been talking about, are asked to turn themselves in. They are all arrested and charged with SA, not because new evidence has emerged overnight, but because since the information had been made public, there was now a lot of pressure from the public for authorities to actually do something about this. At the time of their arrest, 4 out of the 5 were active NHL players. Michael McLeod and Cal were with the New Jersey Devils, Dylan Dube was with the Calgary Flames, Carter Hart was with the Philadelphia Flyers, and Alex Formanton had been playing in Switzerland. All 5 of them took leaves from their team. All 5 of them lawyer up, and then all of their lawyers come out and put out statements claiming their innocence. We are nearly 6 years since the night that everything took place, by the way. It happened in 2018, now it's 2024. It shouldn't have, but it took 5.5 years after the crime took place for arrests to be made. The first trial, the first, took place April 22nd of 2025. The trial opened with a jury seated and ready to go. The prosecution goes through with their opening statements and then they break for lunch. They come back and then one of the jurors tells the judge that a defense attorney spoke to them out in public. Alex Formanton's attorney specifically. Jurors are not allowed to interact with attorneys whatsoever. So the jury comes back and the judge dismisses the jury. They are no longer going to be on this case and the trial was over before it really started. A second jury was seated shortly thereafter. EM testifies for 2 days, then she gets cross-examined for 7 days. So she is telling her story, everything that has happened to her, all of the awful things that she has been through. And then 4 weeks into the trial, a juror tells the judge that they feel uncomfortable because Alex Formanton's attorneys again keep looking at them and laughing at them in the courtroom. So then the second trial falls apart. The jury is dismissed and a new jury has to be found and selected. But then the defense attorney, so the attorneys defending the men, not the victims, say, hey, you know what? Let's not do this a third time. Let's not have a jury. Let's just have a trial, no jury, in which you, the judge, and the judge only decides the verdict. Their argument was that opening statements had already been heard, that the victim, EM, had already spoken, and that she shouldn't have to go through everything again. And the judge says, okay, sure, no jury. I will be the only one to decide the verdict. A lot of people have strong opinions about that because they think that the defense attorneys could have potentially allegedly wanted this the entire time, to have a trial with only the judge, no jury, allegedly. But then the third trial begins with no jury. This is now into May of 2025. The judge hears testimonies from multiple witnesses and examines surveillance footage, text messages, and competing accounts of the night of June 19th, 2018. Some of the text messages include messages from a group chat from back in 2018 with 11 teammates. This group chat was created about a week after the crime took place. A teammate by the name of Jake Bean says, quote, no boys, like we don't have to make anything up. No one did anything wrong. We just went to that room to eat. The girl came. Lie number 1, that's not true. She wanted to have with all of us. Lie number 2. No one did. Lie number 3. She gave a few guys and we got out of the room when things got too crazy. Dylan Dube, who was the captain at the time, says that he doesn't think that they're going to get in trouble for anything that they did. Michael McLeod then says, quote, we all need to say the same thing if we get interviewed. Can't have different stories or make anything up, end quote. The trial continues. Prosecutors obviously building up their case around EM's account of that night, from everything that she remembered and from everything that she had reported back in 2018. But the defense's tactic was to make her sound not credible, arguing that her recollection of events was inconsistent and unreliable. Mind you, this trial is taking place 7 years after that night. So yeah, it makes sense that no one's memories would be as fresh as it would have been should the trial have happened sooner. But the defense uses that to their advantage, breaking down anything that they could to say, look, EM said that this happened when in reality, this is what happened. And in the small details that they could prove to be inconsistent with either CCTV footage or text messages, it sucks and it's terrible, but it did make the judge question whether everything that EM was alleging was true or not. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was the surveillance camera footage showing Michael McLeod leaving that night with EM. Footage that established that yes, they left together, but footage which both sides interpreted differently. The prosecution saw a man targeting a woman. The defense saw two people leaving together willingly. Ultimately, on July 24th of 2025, 7 years and 5 weeks after that night in the hotel room, Maria Carroccia delivered her verdict. She read the verdict for 5 hours, and at the end of it, all 5 men were acquitted on all charges. The core of her reasoning was direct about EM's evidence. Carroccia said that she did not find the complainant's testimony credible or reliable. She highlighted what she described as EM's, quote, tendency to blame others for the inconsistencies in her account. And just like that, all 5 men free to walk. If you're from Canada, I need to hear your thoughts about this. Yeah, I have no words. That's it from me today. Please let me know if you have heard about this case. Also, please let me know if you've seen any documentaries on this. I obviously was reading through a lot of news articles and watching videos on it, but I didn't look up if there's a documentary. I feel like there should be. But yeah, thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to EM's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.